Hi there, and welcome to this lecture about the fall of the Roman Empire and its legacy today. My name is Marcus Henriksson, and I'm a history teacher here in Sweden. So, what happened after Emperor Nero? Well, sometimes the Roman Empire was ruled by the Senate, sometimes by different emperors. But during this time we can see short reigns and a lot of internal conflicts and a lot of unrest. There were a few good ones, for example Marcus Aurelius, also known as the Philosopher Emperor, Vespasian, better known as the Savior of Rome, and Emperor Hadrian. They expanded the Roman Empire, they stabilized the economy, and so forth. And Hadrian, of course, built the Hadrian Wall. But there were large problems for the Roman Empire during this time. In order to gain control over the empire more easily, they also chose to divide the Roman Empire into two parts once more, a West Rome and a East Rome. But dividing the Roman Empire into these two parts had a bunch of problems, especially considering the fact that the East Rome was much more economically stable than West Rome. West Rome didn't have much tax revenue, it didn't even have food enough to sustain itself, and so on. So this division of the Roman Empire and divide of the Roman Empire into two parts created more problems than they solved. West Rome, as I mentioned before, had far too few resources in order to defend its borders against the increasing attacks from outside, both the Huns but also different Germanic tribes. East Rome, however, also had major problems, but managed to control them much better considering the fact that they had much more money and a larger military. So during this time and era we can see that the Roman Empire sustained several attacks both from the east and the west. First, in the east we have the Sassanids who ruled Persia. They attacked the empire on several occasions. But most problems we have from the west, especially from Gothic and German tribes such as the Franks and the Goths. And despite their superior numbers, the Romans won some battles. One large battle was at Milidonium. But in eastern Rome, we have the huge military defeats at Andriopol in the year 376. Most of their army was defeated by the Goths, and they never really recovered from this disaster. Those who failed to defend various parts of the Roman Empire were usually murdered, often by their own legions. We can also see an increase in religious conflicts, especially between Christians, who became more and more during this time, and those who worshipped multiple gods. These religious conflicts grew, so the emperor known as Constantine chose to become Christian on his deathbed in the year 324 AD. But as I also mentioned before, the Huns were the major problem for the Roman Empire. They basically attacked everything and everyone. And the Romans tried to convince the Huns to not attack by bribing them with gold. This cost the Roman Empire enormous sums of money, especially Western Rome. And many ethnical groups now began to seek their way into the Roman Empire in order to escape the Huns and their raping and pillaging. So basically the invasion of Western Rome could not be stopped. We can see that various groups invaded and entered the Eastern Roman Empire, such as the Goths, the Vandals, the Angles, the Saxons, and so forth. And they took control of different parts of the Western Roman Empire. But yeah, it was a tough fight. Despite the superior tactics of the Roman soldiers, their building of forts and fortifications, better equipment and so on, the Germanic people put up a lot of resistance. They were usually much taller than that of the average Romans. They were about 1.7 meters compared to the Romans, who were about 1.55 meters tall. And in the year 476, Rome was captured by the Goths. Some people believe that the Goths were a Germanic tribe, but some historians believe that they were in fact Swedish and came from an island in Sweden known as Gotland, which basically means land of the Goths. But Eastern Rome would then survive and become the Byzantine Empire, with Constantinople as their capital, and it would survive until the year 1453, so basically 1,000 years. So how did in fact the Roman Empire fall? Well, this is a difficult question because many historians have tried to answer it the best they can. Different historians give different factors, different importance, and so on. But let me show you how I see at their fall. It all began, according to myself, with the Pax Romana, also known as the Roman peace. It was a peace that lasted for about 200 years. During this time, we can see that the Roman economy and the Roman Empire in fact was built for expansion. War could bring great wealth in form of economic resources, slaves and land. And I believe that the Roman Empire was in fact built for expansion. They needed to conquer more land in order for their economy to survive and sustain itself. And when they made the slaves citizens in the year 212 AD, basically they gave up free labor. They usually gave slaves their freedom in order for them to vote a certain way in the Roman Senate. So in order for some emperors to still have power, they usually gave some slaves their freedom. But this in fact led to a decrease in the slave labor force. And when the Roman Empire didn't conquer new lands and territories, they couldn't give the soldiers land instead of money. And when they also lacked money, this became a major and huge problem. Because the Roman Empire had really significant costs, such as gladiatorial games. Some historians believe that an estimate of 700,000 died as gladiators in the gladiator arenas and stadiums. But these places didn't just offer that kind of entertainment. They also provided the people with exotic animals such as elephants, tigers, and so on, and they had to import those, and they cost a bunch of money. They also had public executions of Christians and so on, and that is not cheap as well. And they had major naval battles in the Colosseum. They basically filled this entire arena with water and had two ships battle one another. And yeah, it cost a fortune. They also had horse races, and the best paid athletes of all time, you can't find them today. It is this guy, Gaius Apollodius Diocles, who won over 1,000 races, earning him 35 million sesterci, which is basically $15 billion today. And the politicians and senators, they always wanted more money to finance their luxurious lifestyle. And they also bought a lot of votes from the normal Roman people in order to sustain their power. Plus, we have the problem with inflation. So, who were going to pay for the Romans' defense? Well, in the east, they gain a bunch of tax and wheat from Egypt. That way, they had a far better economy than Western Rome. So, it's easy to see why Eastern Rome survived while the West Rome fall. They couldn't really sustain themselves and their defense. So when a bunch of ethnical groups invaded and started to settle there, they couldn't really push them out. So yeah, it was the Huns and their conquest of Western Europe, which basically put a lot of pressure on the Romans and their borders, and the pressure became too high. And some historians also believe that we can see some climate change during this time, especially during the 4th and 5th centuries, which in fact might also have contributed to more and more people trying to get to the Roman Empire instead of living in the north. So what is the legacy of the Roman Empire today? Well, first of all, we have the Roman law system, and that's the foundation of today's legal system. Romans had the first lawyers, the first judges, and so on. At some time, the people passed the verdict, which we can also see today, in some court systems at least. We also have more similarities to today's system, such as the rich people in countries like the US have a big advantage, and so on. And did you know that the rich in Rome also had the opportunity to sit under house arrest, while the poor instead often ended up in prison? If we compare this with today's system in the US, well, there are a bunch of people who are in prison just because they can't afford to pay. But there are also some differences. There were unbelievable horrible punishments in the Roman Empire. Everything from slave labor to whipping and crucifixions. In the Roman Empire, we also have the first police officers and the first kind of bodyguard system, the Praetorians. They also had the first firefighters, and they created the language Latin. And you might also say that Christianity became so popular and survived because of the Roman Empire when they made Christianity their state religion. And Rome became a really important place for Christians because it became the seat of the Pope. And yeah, we have some Roman architecture that even lives on today, such as creation of vaults, arches, toilets, aqueducts, ponds, baths, arenas, and so on. And they created the Roman calendar. So every month that we can see today, March, April, September, August, October, and so on, July, are in fact Roman. And some historians also believe that the Roman Empire created the world's first banking system. And they contributed a lot to the healing arts, such as creation of the pulse taking. And they created a huge span of roads in Europe, but this system lives on today. And they created a bunch of cities such as Rome, of course, but also London, Paris, and so on. So I hope that you during this short lecture have learned something, but if you have any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. The sources I've used for this video are World History, A New Perspective by Clyde Ponting, A History of World Societies by John P. McKay, The World's History, History by Elisabeth Ivansson, Robert Sandberg and Mattias Tudaj, All Time History Maxi by Halms Argren, Börje Bergström and Arne Lövgren, The First Roman Emperor Line by Tom Holland. Yeah, here are some other sources as well. Feel free to pause the video, Wikipedia, and so on. Some documentaries such as Rome, Engineering and Empire, Historical Secrets, Season 4, Episode 4, The Gladiators in York, Roman Army during the crisis of the 3rd century, The Rise and Fall of an Empire, BBC documentary, Attila the Hun, The Scourge of God, The Dark Ages, An Age of Light, Part 2, The Animated History of Italy, Part 1 and 2, Aurelian, Emperor Who Restored the World, Roman Imperial Cavalry, Armies and Tactics, The Battle of Adrianople, Vespasian, the Savior of Rome and Father of the Colosseum, Marcus Aurelius, the Philosopher King, Crisis of the 3rd century of the Roman Empire, What went on in a typical Roman household, How ancient Rome shaped the modern world, Why Romans adored Emperor Vespasian, The ancient tribes of Europe that rebelled against Rome, How the Huns became the terror of Europe, Late Roman Empire, the decline of cities, The economy of ancient Rome, Is the Anglo-Saxon invasion of England a myth, For the glory of Rome, the true cost of Roman wealth, Vandal kingdom in Africa and the sack of Rome, Alaric's sack of Rome, Marcus Aurelius, philosopher emperor, How the Romans adopted the Greek gods, Inflation and Fall of Rome, Economic History documentary, Rise of Christianity documentary, Law and Order in Ancient Rome, Why did the Roman Empire collapse, with Mary Beard, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. So I hope that you have learned something. Have a great day. Bye.